Hi everyone, it's Miss Maria with the Hemphill Branch of the Greensboro Public Library. So we're going to learn how to put a warp on an embroidery hoop loom. This is the trickiest type of warping that we've done so far, so we're going to take our time, be patient. If you try this and you get frustrated or you make a tangled mess, that's okay. I've done that before. Just keep practicing until you've got it exactly right. So I have a wooden embroidery hoop. I've taken the outer ring off. I'm going to put that to the side. The inner ring, scissors, and just a plain cotton yarn. So how do I measure how much I need for my warp? Well, I'm just going to figure out, I want about 17 warp threads or spokes. So I'm just going to wrap it around real quickly to get a rough estimate of my yarn. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and then I'm going to do it a couple of times extra. So about like that, and cut that. And that's approximately the amount of yarn that we'll need to put our warp on. So let me slide that off, and let's get started. We're going to tie it at the top of our hoop, the inner hoop. Just tie a double knot. And then we're going to start wrapping it so that we have spokes. It's going to look sort of like a bicycle wheel when we're finished. And because we want it to be flat in the middle, we're going to cross through the hoop every time. So let me get this yarn in a way that I can put it through easily without tangling it, I hope. Okay, so you can use whatever color that you want for the center. A little bit of it will show at the edge, so keep that in mind. You might want to go with just a plain white or beige, but you can use something more colorful as well. It's entirely up to you. Okay, so now we have our knot at the top. We're going to go through the middle of our hoop, wrap around the bottom, pulling it pretty tightly, back through the middle, and back up to the top, a little space over from where we started. So maybe an inch or so over. Back through the middle, and a little space over at the bottom. Back through the middle, keeping it spaced out, but we can arrange the spacing a little bit at the end as well. Back through the middle, around again, and keep going. So you're arranging your spokes around the wooden hoop. Keep going. Through the middle, around, through the middle, around again. Slide them so they're mostly evenly spaced. And we want to end up with an odd number because the odd number works best for circle weaving. And we want, so I'm aiming for about 17, but we want them to be as even as we can. So keep going, around, through the middle, pull it snugly, around, through the middle. So do you see it's starting to look like a wheel or a star pattern in a way? Keep going. And let me see how many I've got so far. So the one where my finger is, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So we'll do 2 more so we end up with 17. So around, back through the middle, the middle. So let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. I went too far, so let's take that one off and let me count it again. Here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. Perfect. Now, see that each one of these is a double, is a one on top and on bottom, except for where we started. But before we go back there, we're going to even them out a little bit. So we cover our entire wheel, the circle of our hoop. So they're roughly an inch or so apart. Sliding them around, still holding the one that I'm currently at. Okay, now before we come back to the one where we started, we are going to go through the middle a little bit, because you see how that doesn't look much like a bicycle wheel right there. It's kind of a mess, and we want to tighten that up. So we're going to go through the middle and pull that around. See how they start to pull together? Then turn, come through the middle again, tighten that up some more. Now we can spread them a little bit more evenly. And let me count them one more time, starting with the knot. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. And one thing I've learned is if you do end up with too many, if you have an even number instead of an odd number, you can always slide 2 together and that will put you back at your odd number. So I'm going to keep wrapping around the middle a little bit to tighten that circle up. I hope that you can see this and it makes sense. Let me slide them a little bit more. Okay, now we're going to take back to that same place that we started. Now that we have our circle pretty even, we're going to go back to where we started and we're going to tie that to the same place on our hoop. So cut the extra, pull that around, and tie it. There we go. So now we have an odd number of spokes. They're all double, one on the front and one on the back. We'll even them up a little bit more, and then we'll put our outer hoop back on, and that helps to hold them secure, and anyone that might be a little bit loose, now that you have your outer hoop on, no problem. Okay friends, now let's begin our weaving. We're going to do several rounds of just plain basic over, under weaving like you've done before on other projects. So we're going to start from the back. I've got a plastic yarn needle. You can use metal tapestry needle, you can use your fingers, whatever works for you. But I'm going to come up from the back. I'm going to leave just about 3 inches or so of yarn back at the back. And I'll just hold that with my fingers for the first few rounds. So we're going to go over, under, pulling it through. Just a plain weaving. I'm using a fairly simple yarn, not anything that's textured or bumpy for this first few rounds. and I'm just sliding it toward the middle. So over, under, over, under. We're going to keep on with that pattern. Over, under, over, under. You guys know how to do this by now. You've probably done it with yarn or paper weaving. Pulling it through, sliding it toward the middle. On circle weaving, you will still have that little axle sort of thing in the middle. That's okay. We'll just keep going around with our over under weaving. Until we've been around at least probably 5 times to smooth out, flatten out the middle of our warp a little bit, secure that area where the threads meet. And still just holding our end back there toward the back. So keep on with the over under for several rows, and when I get some of this done, I'll show you another technique as well. So just stay tuned. Okay friends, I finished several rows of plain weaving that has sort of flattened down the center of my warp threads. And at this point I have several choices as to what I would like to do. I could add a different color of yarn. If I wanted to do that, I would just tie it to the end of my pink yarn at the back and keep weaving in whatever pattern I liked. You know that if you've watched any of our weaving tutorials, once you get the base established, you can then change it up with thicker yarn, thinner yarn, bumpy yarn. You can go over 2 or 3, under 1 or 2, to give lots of different appearances or looks to your weaving project. You can change colors the same way by just cutting the one that you're on, tying on the new one. That knot will be hidden on the back. Since I'm going to do a different technique right now, I'm just going to tie those two together, the one that we started and the end of that same color. Just going to tie them together on the back so they won't get in my way for the next technique, and then I'll trim those off. Now for this next technique, I'm using a thicker, bumpier yarn. I'm just cutting a fairly decent length, but not so long that it will get tangled. And we're going to try a technique that will sort of look like a braid or a chain as it goes around our circle weaving. So you've got your length of yarn. I'm going to fold it in half. I'm going to have my 2 ends. One end will go under the warp string and one will go on top. And I'll pull that so that center is right there on the warp string. Now, we've done this before with flat weaving. You may have seen it or tried it yourself. But for circle weaving, this technique is a little different. So we're going to take our 2 ends, go over the next warp thread, over and then under that one, and back through the middle of our 2 loops. So there are our 2 loops, and we're coming up through the middle and pulling it snug. And that's the first section of our braid. So let me make sure that you understand this. We want to spread those loops right here out a little bit. It looks almost like a heart, doesn't it? Then we've got our 2 ends over here going over the next warp string, under the next warp string, that same one that we were just over, and we're going to pull that up in the middle of what was that heart shape that we had, that opening. So now you can see how the braid is starting to develop. So spread these out like a heart. Go over this next warp string and to the back. Then come up in that space through the middle of the heart. Pull it a little snugly and slide it down. You don't want to pull these so tightly. You don't want to distort the shape of your warp. or make it too flat. You want them to look a little fluffy, but you do want to snug it up to your previous weaving. So let me do a couple more so you can get the idea. Spread this out like a heart shape. We're going to go down over this next warp string. So over that and to the back. Then we're going to bring that up in the middle of our heart and pull it snug. And just keep going around. You can see that I've almost completed the braid all the way around my circle, but I've zoomed in a little closer so that you can see, make sure that you understand this technique. So it's also easier with as our yarn threads get shorter. But here are our two threads, our two ends. We're going down over that warp thread. I've spread out my loops and I'm pulling back up between the two of them and snugging my braid up right there. So one more down and up through the loop. And that takes me around my circle one time. Now, sometimes I like to go ahead and do one more so that they overlap and I know that they're secure. So let me do that. Down, up through the loops, and that makes sure that I don't have a gap. Now, I will take these ends to the back and I will tuck them in with a yarn needle, or I can tie them to the next color that comes along, whatever, to secure that. So I will continue this project with some other colors and some different over 2 under 1 different patterns, so that you can see how that looks. At the very end, we'll tie or tuck all of our ends inside the back of our weaving. And the one great thing about the hoop is that it has a built-in hook so that you can hang that on the wall as a decoration, whatever you would like to do with it. Thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoy this project.